The thing about being underestimated by your own family is that eventually you stop fighting it. You let them believe what they want to believe and you build your actual life somewhere they're not looking. I learned this lesson around year 3 of my surgical residency, when Mom asked if I was still doing that medical school thing, and seemed genuinely surprised I hadn't given up yet. By year 5, when I'd been published in the New England Journal of Medicine for innovative trauma surgery techniques, she was telling her book club friends I worked at a hospital in some technical capacity. Now at 33 I'd stopped correcting her entirely. "Marcus, tell everyone about the promotion," Mom said, beaming at my older brother across the Christmas dinner table. The dining room of my parents' suburban Boston home was decorated within an inch of its life, every surface covered in garland, lights, and an aggressive amount of holiday cheer. Marcus straightened in his chair, preparing to hold court. "Well, I'm now senior project manager at the firm. It's a big step up. I'll be overseeing multiple development teams, directly reporting to the VP of engineering." "That's wonderful, honey." Mom clapped her hands together. "A real leadership position. Your father and I are so proud." Dad nodded approvingly. "That's the kind of career progression that matters. Management. 40. Making real decisions." My younger sister Diane chimed in from her end of the table. "And I just made partner at the law firm. Youngest person in the firm's history to make partner before 35. More enthusiastic congratulations erupted around the table. More praise for real accomplishments, tangible career milestones that made sense to people who read job titles and understood corporate hierarchies. Then Mom turned to me with that expression. The one that mixed maternal concern with mild disappointment, like looking at a houseplant that refused to thrive despite adequate watering. "And Jordan, how's your computer work going?" I took a sip of wine. "It's going well, thanks." "Still in the basement at that hospital?" Dad asked, his tone suggesting this was roughly equivalent to living in a van. "I work at Massachusetts General, yes." "Doing the IT stuff?" Marcus asked, not unkindly. He genuinely believed this. They all did. "Tech support, computer repairs, that sort of thing?" "I work with technology in a medical context," I said, which was technically true. Surgical robots were technology. Advanced imaging systems were technology. The entire modern operating room was essentially a technology showcase. Mom patted my hand sympathetically. "Well, hospital work is stable even if it's just technical support. Not everyone can be in management or leadership. The important thing is you're employed." Diane's husband, a corporate attorney who joined the family 2 years ago, leaned forward with the confidence of someone about to impart wisdom. "Have you considered getting certified in hospital administration? IT skills are good, but if you want to move up you need business credentials. I know some people in healthcare management if you want an introduction." "That's thoughtful," I said. "I'm pretty settled in my current role though." "But there's no advancement in tech support," Marcus insisted, his project manager instincts kicking in. "You're 33, Jordan. You should be thinking about career progression. Moving into management. Building something." Dad set down his fork with that decisive gesture that meant he was about to deliver serious fatherly advice. "Your brother's right. You've been doing the same computer job for 8 years now? At some point you need to show ambition. Take on leadership responsibilities. Make something of yourself." I'd been chief of surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital for 14 months. Before that I'd spent 2 years as vice chief. Before that I'd been the head of the trauma surgery division. I oversaw 240 physicians across 11 surgical departments. Last month I'd performed a groundbreaking procedure that separated conjoined twins. A surgery so complex it had required 17 hours in the OR and coordination with specialists from 4 countries. But sure, I needed to show more ambition. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, refilling my wine glass. Mom sighed. "We just worry about you, honey. Marcus has his management career, Diane has her partnership. They're building real professional legacies. You're a smart person. You could do more than fix computers in a hospital basement." "I appreciate the concern. Have you at least gotten a raise recently?" Dad asked. "Cost of living in Boston is brutal. I hope they're paying you decently for the tech support work." My compensation package last year was north of $800,000, not including bonuses and speaking fees. My hospital basement was actually a corner office on the 8th floor of the surgical wing with views of the Charles River. But I just smiled and said, "I'm doing fine financially, Dad." The conversation mercifully shifted to other topics. Diane's recent courtroom victory, Marcus's new house in the suburbs, Mom's book club drama. I faded into the background, which was where I preferred to be during these family gatherings. Let them have their narratives. Let them believe I was their underachieving youngest child who'd somehow ended up in a dead-end tech support job at a hospital. The truth was too complicated to explain, and they'd proven over the years that they weren't interested in hearing it. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. I ignored it. Probably a consult request that my on-call team could handle. Christmas dinner with family meant being unavailable unless it was a genuine emergency. Buzzed again. Then a third time in rapid succession. I pulled it out discreetly under the table and glanced at the screen. 3 messages from my administrative assistant, marked urgent. Mass casualty incident incoming. Multi-vehicle accident on I-93. At least 15 critical injuries. All trauma teams being activated. If we need you. Multiple complex traumas. Your team is requesting your presence. Trauma bay is being cleared. This is going to require all hands. I was reading the 4th message when my pager went off. The high-priority tone that meant genuine emergency, not routine consult. In the sudden silence that followed the beeping, every head at the table turned toward me. What's that noise? Mom asked, looking confused. Is your phone broken? It's a pager, I said, standing up and pulling the device from my belt. The screen showed what I'd expected. Trauma alert, mass casualty, chief of surgery required, immediate response. A pager. Marcus laughed. Those still exist. I thought only doctors use those, and even then. He stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting as some connection fired in his brain. I was already moving toward the hallway, pulling up the detailed incident report on my phone. 15 victims, multiple critical. At least 3 requiring immediate surgical intervention. 2 pediatric cases. This was going to be bad. My phone rang, the distinctive tone I'd assigned to my trauma coordinator. I answered while grabbing my coat from the hall closet. Dr. Williams, we've got a developing situation. Sarah's voice was calm but urgent, the tone of someone who'd coordinated enough emergencies to stay professional under pressure. Multi-vehicle pileup on I-93 northbound. Initial responders are reporting at least 15 critical injuries. We're activating all trauma teams, but we need you here. Multiple cases are going to require your expertise. What's the breakdown? I asked, already running through mental protocols. 3 patients with severe chest trauma, 2 with complex orthopedic injuries, 1 with massive internal bleeding, and 2 pediatric cases with head trauma. Plus multiple others still being assessed. The ER is about to be overwhelmed. Activate the disaster protocols. I want all available or staff called in. Clear operating rooms 2 through 7. Get neuro involved for the head traumas and call Dr. Patterson in for the pediatric cases. I'm 20 minutes out. Already done. We're setting up now. How fast can you get here? I'll be there in 15. I hung up and found my entire family crowded in the hallway, staring at me with expressions ranging from confused to stunned. What was that about? Dad asked. Why are you talking about operating rooms? I was shrugging into my coat and checking my bag, always kept packed with a change of scrubs and my surgical basics. Mass casualty incident. I need to get to the hospital. But your IT support, Mom said, her voice rising with confusion. Why would they call you for a medical emergency? I'm not IT support, Mom. I'm a surgeon. A surgeon. Diane's voice was sharp with disbelief. Since when? Since I completed my residency 9 years ago. Since I finished my fellowship in trauma surgery 8 years ago. Since I became an attending physician 7 years ago. I was moving toward the door, but they'd formed a semicircle blocking my path. Marcus stepped forward, his expression cycling through confusion and something that might have been anger. Wait, you're saying you're an actual doctor? Surgeon? And you've been letting us think you work in IT for how long? I never said I worked in IT. You all decided that's what I did, and I stopped correcting you after the 15th time you ignored me. My phone rang again. Dr. Williams, first ambulance is 2 minutes out. Severe chest trauma, possible cardiac involvement. We need you in Trauma 1 immediately. On my way. I ended the call and met my mother's eyes. I'm the chief of surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. I have been for over a year. Before that, I ran the trauma surgery division for 3 years. I'm also an associate professor at Harvard Medical School, and I've published 47 papers in peer-reviewed journals. Now if you'll excuse me, I have 15 people who are going to die if I don't get to the hospital in the next 10 minutes. The silence was absolute. Mom's face had gone pale. Dad's mouth was opening and closing wordlessly. Marcus looked like someone had struck him with a 2x4. The chief of surgery, Diane whispered. You're the chief of surgery at Mass General. Yes. But all this time we thought you were. Tech support in the basement. I know. You've mentioned it at every family gathering for the past 8 years. My phone was ringing again. The pager was going off. I could hear the urgency in every alert, feel the weight of what was waiting for me at the hospital. People were being loaded into ambulances right now, their lives depending on what happened in the next few hours. I moved past my frozen family and opened the front door. The cold December air hit my face, sharp and clarifying. Jordan, wait. Mom's voice cracked. You can't we need to talk about this. I'll call you later, I said over my shoulder, already moving toward my car. A Tesla Model S that they'd always assumed was beyond my tech support salary. Right now, I have actual lives to save. I was in the car and starting the engine when Marcus ran out, his dress shoes slipping slightly on the icy driveway. He grabbed my door before I could close it. Hold on. Just hold on a second. His breath came out in white puffs. You're really the chief of surgery? The Mass General? That's one of the best hospitals in the country. Top 3 usually. Sometimes we hit number 1 depending on the rankings. And you've been letting me, give you career advice about getting into hospital management? You seem to enjoy it. I didn't want to ruin the moment. His face was doing something complicated. Embarrassment and confusion and a dawning horror at years of condescending advice now revealed as absurd. I told you that you needed to show more ambition. I said you should try to move into leadership. I remember. It was last Thanksgiving. You suggested I could probably work my way up to IT department supervisor if I applied myself. Oh my God. He stepped back from the car, his expression shifting to something like nausea. I'm so sorry. We all are. We had no idea. I tried to tell you. Multiple times. But every time I mentioned medical school or residency or my research, you'd change the subject or make a joke about me playing doctor. Eventually, I realized you weren't interested in hearing about my actual life. You'd constructed a narrative that made sense to you and information that contradicted that narrative just didn't register. My phone lit up with another call. The trauma coordinator, 3rd time in 5 minutes. This was getting serious. I really do have to go, Marcus. People are dying. We'll talk later. I closed the door and backed out of the driveway, leaving him standing in the cold, still looking shell-shocked. In my rearview mirror, I could see the rest of my family emerging from the house, clustering on the front steps, their Christmas dinner forgotten in the face of this revelation. The drive to Mass General took 13 minutes, slightly better than my estimate thanks to light holiday traffic. I pulled into my reserved spot in the staff parking area, the one labeled Chief of Surgery, in clear letters that my family would probably find mind-blowing if they ever saw it. The hospital was already in controlled chaos mode when I entered through the emergency staff entrance. The disaster protocols had been activated perfectly. Trauma bays cleared, additional staff flooding in, the entire machine of a level 1 trauma center spinning up to handle mass casualties. Sarah met me at the entrance to the trauma wing, iPad in hand, already walking as she briefed me. First wave is here. We've got a 43-year-old male with a flail chest, possible cardiac tamponade. He's in trauma 1. Second ambulance is 30 seconds out with a pediatric case. 8-year-old girl, severe head trauma. Third wave is coming in hot with multiple crush injuries. I was already moving, my mind shifting completely into surgical mode. The family drama, the years of misunderstanding, the shocked faces on the driveway, all of it fell away. This was what mattered. This was what I actually did. Not fixing computers in a basement, but making split-second decisions that determined whether people lived or died. Trauma Bay 1 was organized chaos. My team was already there. 2 of my best trauma surgeons, an anesthesiologist, 3 nurses, all moving with practiced efficiency. The patient on the table was a mess. Chest visibly unstable, breathing labored, vital signs deteriorating. Talk to me, I said, snapping on gloves as I approached the table. Dr. Rachel Kim, one of my senior trauma attendings, rattled off the assessment. Multiple rib fractures, paradoxical chest movement suggesting flail chest. Hypotensive, tachycardic. Beck's triad present. I think we've got cardiac tamponade. I did my own rapid assessment, my hands and eyes cataloging injuries with the speed that came from thousands of similar evaluations. She was right. The muffled heart sounds, the distended neck veins, the blood pressure pattern. The pericardial sac was filling with blood, compressing the heart, preventing it from pumping effectively. "Get me an ultrasound," I ordered. "And prep for an emergency pericardiocentesis. If that doesn't work, we're going to the OR for a thoracotomy." The ultrasound confirmed it. A large pericardial effusion, the heart literally being squeezed by accumulated blood. No time for the OR. We had to drain it now or he'd arrest in minutes. I positioned the needle with the careful precision that came from having done this procedure hundreds of times, finding the exact angle, the exact depth, threading it into the pericardial space without nicking the heart itself. The patient's vitals were screaming, alarms going off, the anesthesiologist calling out declining oxygen saturation. The needle hit the pocket of blood. I began withdrawing fluid, dark red, under pressure. As the pericardial sac decompressed, the heart could expand again, could pump effectively. The patient's blood pressure started coming up. The alarms began quieting. "That's it," I said, steadying the needle. "Keep monitoring. If he stays stable, we can take him up for a formal repair. Rachel, you've got this one. Take him 2 or 3 when he's ready." "Got it, Chief." I was already moving to the next bay. The 8-year-old with head trauma. This one was going to be delicate, pediatric neurosurgery, requiring precision and patience and a particular kind of emotional control that came from years of operating on children. The next 6 hours blurred together in the way trauma surgery always did. A series of critical decisions, emergency interventions, moments where everything hung on getting the technique exactly right. The 43-year-old with the cardiac tamponade survived and went to the ICU stable. The 8-year-old required a complex craniotomy to evacuate a subdural hematoma, but her prognosis was good. A teenager with a ruptured spleen got an emergency splenectomy. 2 orthopedic cases with complex fractures were stabilized and sent to surgery with the ortho team. By 2 a.m. the immediate crisis was over. 15 critical patients had come through our doors. 13 were alive and stable. 2 had been too far gone when they arrived. The massive head trauma, the internal injuries that were simply too extensive to repair. 2 deaths out of 15 critical traumas was actually good. Better than the statistical average. But every loss still hit like a personal failure. A reminder that even with all my training and experience, I couldn't save everyone. I was in the staff lounge, still in my blood-stained scrubs, drinking terrible coffee and completing the last of my documentation when Sarah found me. "Chief, you've got about 40 missed calls on your personal phone. Should I be concerned?" "Family," I said. "They just found out what I actually do for a living." She raised an eyebrow. "How did they think you paid for that penthouse in Beacon Hill?" "They thought I rented a small apartment somewhere and was very good with credit cards." "That's..." She searched for words. "How? You're the chief of surgery at Mass General. You're in the news. You've been on CNN. You literally testified before the state legislature about healthcare policy last year. They don't watch medical news. They don't follow healthcare policy. And when I tried to tell them, they heard what they wanted to hear and filtered out the rest." I took another sip of terrible coffee. It was easier to let them believe what they wanted than to keep fighting about it. "But you're one of the top trauma surgeons in the country. You pioneered 2 new surgical techniques. You've saved hundreds of lives." To them, I was the underachieving youngest child who never quite measured up to Marcus's project management career or Diane's law partnership. Sarah shook her head slowly. "That's genuinely insane. What changed tonight?" "Mass casualty incident. They heard me take the call, saw the pager, heard me coordinating the trauma response. Kind of hard to maintain the IT guy narrative when someone calls you chief of surgery repeatedly on a phone call your entire family overhears." "Oh." He started laughing. "Oh, that must have been satisfying." "More complicated than satisfying. Mostly just sad, honestly. 8 years of being underestimated by people who should have known better." My personal phone buzzed again. Text from Mom. "Please call. We need to understand what happened. Why didn't you tell us?" Another from Dad. "We're proud of you. We should have listened better. Please come back so we can talk." Marcus. "I'm an idiot. I gave the chief of surgery at Mass General advice about career advancement. I'm never going to live this down." Diane. "Why didn't you correct us? We made fools of ourselves." I set the phone down without responding. They could wait. Right now, I had patient charts to review, follow-up orders to write, and 2 families to notify about deaths that would shatter their holidays. The personal drama could wait. The actual job, the one they'd never bothered to understand, came first. Sarah was still watching me. Are you going to call them back? Eventually. Not tonight. They're probably losing their minds. Probably. But I've been losing my mind at family dinners for 8 years, listening to career advice from people who didn't know what my career actually was. They can manage one night of uncertainty. She smiled slightly. That's cold, Chief. That's reality. They constructed a comfortable narrative where they were successful and I was struggling. That narrative made them feel good about themselves, so they maintained it even when I presented evidence to the contrary. Now they're dealing with cognitive dissonance and it's uncomfortable. Welcome to what I've been experiencing for nearly a decade. My phone rang, the hospital line. Probably a consult or a post-op update. I answered, falling back into the professional mode that was more comfortable than family drama. Dr. Williams. Chief, it's the ICU. The cardiac tamponade case from earlier. He's stable but his family is here. They're asking to speak to the surgeon who saved his life. I'll be right there. I stood up, drained the last of the terrible coffee and headed toward the ICU. This was the part of the job that nobody saw, that my family certainly didn't understand. Not just the dramatic surgery but the aftermath. The family meetings. The careful explanations. The managing of expectations and grief and hope. The patient's wife was in the ICU waiting room with 2 adult children, all of them looking exhausted and terrified. They stood up when they saw me approaching, their faces desperate for information. Mrs. Patterson? I'm Dr. Williams, Chief of Surgery. I performed the emergency procedure on your husband. Is he going to be okay? Her voice was shaking. They said his heart, they said he almost died. He was in critical condition when he arrived. He'd developed a condition called cardiac tamponade. Blood was accumulating around his heart, preventing it from pumping effectively. We performed an emergency drainage procedure which stabilized him. He's currently in the ICU sedated, but his vital signs are strong. The next 24 hours are critical but his prognosis is good. She started crying, the release of tension that came from fear transforming into hope. One of the adult children, a woman about my age, grabbed my hand. Thank you. Thank you so much. They said if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't known exactly what to do. I had an excellent team, I said, which was true. But yes, timing was critical. He's lucky he got to us when he did. We talked for another 20 minutes. Me explaining the injuries, the procedure, the recovery timeline, what to expect in the coming days. Answering their questions with patience and clarity, helping them process the trauma of nearly losing someone they loved. This was what I did. This was what my family had dismissed as computer work in the basement. These moments of life and death, these conversations with terrified families, these decisions that rippled out in ways they would never understand. It was nearly 4 a.m. when I finally left the hospital. The December night was bitter cold, the city quiet in that particular way of pre-dawn Boston. My phone had accumulated more messages, family mostly, but also several from colleagues who'd heard about the mass casualty response and were checking in. I drove home through empty streets, too tired to process the family drama properly. My penthouse, the one they thought was a small apartment, was dark and quiet when I arrived. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the Charles River a dark ribbon reflecting scattered lights. I poured a proper glass of wine, not the cheap stuff from dinner, and stood at the window thinking about perception and reality. About how people see what they want to see, hear what they want to hear. About how exhausting it becomes to correct those misperceptions, especially when the people doing the misperceiving are the ones who should know you best. My phone buzzed one final time. Text from Rachel Kim, "Great work tonight, Chief. That cardiac tamponade save was textbook. Guy's stable and looking good for recovery. You made the difference." I smiled and typed back, "Team effort. You all did excellent work." But I kept her message on the screen, staring at those words. You made the difference. That's what mattered. Not my family's belated recognition of my career. Not their shock at discovering I wasn't who they thought I was. But this, the actual work, the actual lives saved, the actual difference made. Tomorrow I'd deal with the family situation. I'd have the uncomfortable conversations, accept their apologies, maybe try to rebuild something more honest. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd let them sit with the discomfort of realizing they'd spent 8 years being wrong about someone they claimed to love. But tonight I was just tired. Tired from the surgery, tired from the revelations, tired from years of being underestimated. I finished the wine and went to bed. Somewhere in suburban Boston, my family was probably still awake, processing and panicking and trying to reconcile their comfortable narrative with the uncomfortable reality. But I had surgery scheduled at 7 a.m., and sleep was more important than their crisis of understanding. They could figure it out on their own. After all, I'd been figuring things out on my own for years.